Michelle, thank you for joining us. Again, like I said, thank you for being a part of the Real Mamas community. Thank you for joining Collaboration City as a founding resident. Really want to use this opportunity to get to know you better, to get to know your work better, and to hear your thoughts on, what's happening on the industry and what is happening within our community. And feel free to share, anything about on the personal side, on the family side as well, because, the whole purpose of what we're building here is a place where mothers, senior mothers can be both senior professionals and also tackle their family life full on without having to hide any of the versions of themselves. So maybe you can start by introducing to us what you do, what change agent is, and like what was your path and to getting here.
Yeah, no, thanks for welcoming me here and excited to participate in this and be a founding member of Collaboration City. I'm a lawyer by training. Was always in regulated financial services, went to law school, was in big law, was a partner in big law, and in 2015 I was at a party and a bunch of secondary market traders were talking about how Ethereum, Bitcoin, and mining were going to change the face of financial services. And these were words that I had never heard at that time. And what struck me was the passion that these traditional finance executives had about this new technology. Um, and and it got me really interested in what this was and how it could disrupt what were my clients at the time. And so I'm completely self-taught. Back in 2015, there weren't MIT and Wharton courses. There wasn't even a lot of internet content. But I dug around and I learned, and I spent a lot of time in Brooklyn Navy Yards and talking to engineers, talking to professors at universities, and just sort of gaining an understanding of what this was. Um, I think it's also juxtaposed by where I was in my professional career. I was a junior partner. The game at law firms is to generate revenue, either by having your own book of business or being a service partner to someone else who has a book of business. I had played that role as a service partner very well, but also realized you are then at the mercy of that partner's practice. And it wasn't something that I, at the time as a single mom, as the sole breadwinner, felt entirely comfortable with. And I wanted to control my own destiny and I wanted to have my own practice. And I thought, if this technology, blockchain, if cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, if the concept of mining, if these were going to disrupt my industry and my clients, I wanted to be a part of it. And so I launched the digital asset and blockchain practice at two AmLaw 100 law firms. The interesting thing was the firm I was at had a large maritime practice. And that practice was looking into blockchain for shipping to, to sort of fix some of the pain points of all the steps in the process of shipping. So I was lucky in the respect that the firm had already had people looking into it, but nobody was working really on the crypto angle.
Hmm.
And because I came from regulated financial services, I felt more comfortable in the more regulated parts of crypto, which was primarily Financial Crimes Enforcement Network had already given us by 2014 some guidance about Treasury's view of cryptocurrency. And actually, some states had also started giving some guidance. And so that's really where I anchored my practice. Fast forward, I became one of the leading lawyers who engaged with money transmission, the receipt of value, whether it be fiat or crypto, and the transmission of that value. And normally people think of that as like your Zelle, your Venmos, but it's also your Coinbases and your Krakens, and your Paxoses and all those types of companies. And so I was really working in the most regulated parts of the industry, which was sometimes difficult because I really liked working with startups. And so I had to figure out a way that I could work with these startup entities who also needed regulatory registrations and licenses. But it was a very inefficient and costly process, which eventually led to me establishing change agents.
So tell me more about the startup, the desire to work with startups, right? I've I have feel actually very similarly to you, but the interesting thing is that I think as a founder, I think you would likely agree that it's probably more work than just having a job, so to say. Having your own business, working with other people who are also starting their own business, that very quickly fans into a lot of work streams, many of which you probably didn't expect to need to do, but squarely falls onto your plate. So, if I'm like kind of tracking the timing here, and you mentioned you're a single mother, what gave you, I think, the confidence to tackle that when your kids were younger?
That's a great question. I think in some respects, you get into a little bit of survival mode, right? Like, how
Mm.
am I going to provide for myself and my kids, right? And make sure that there's financial security.
Hmm.
And I think for me, I was just laser focused on developing this book of business. And because I had this expertise and because this industry was so nascent, a lot of the projects I was dealing with were startups, which was pretty unfamiliar for me because I was really working mostly with traditional finance. But what I found was there is an energy and there is a passion that I think startup founders have. And so as a mom with young kids, like to me, I felt like those are my babies, right? And you care most
Mm.
about your babies. But for a company and a startup, it's their baby and they care equally as much about their baby. And if you tell a startup founder that's a terrible idea, you're basically telling them their baby is terrible, right? And so, you see this sort of bud and this idea that people have, and maybe they have funding, maybe they don't, but they're really at an incubator stage and they were doing really interesting things and it was exciting. And it was more exciting than honestly some of the other things I was doing. So I think that's kind of what got me into this startup world.
Yeah, there's a few other members within Collaboration City who are also starting their own businesses. I think one or two of them literally like just incorporated very, very recently. So I think this would be really inspirational to them to, see someone who has done it and has done it well, um, in in both angles, right? So thank you for sharing that. Um,
Yeah.
so, you have I think, pretty unique vantage point to a certain life cycle of where the industry is at. Um, how would you say that the industry has evolved since, my goodness, 2015 to now 2026, right? I think the industry, meaning crypto in particular, has changed a lot. Um, and also, I think like the AI has become a part of everything, in a way that is not separable anymore. So I love to hear, maybe even some war stories of how, or that can, help showcase how the industry has changed over the past like decade.
Yeah, I think what fascinated me was the ability to move value 24/7, 365, right?
Mhm.
And to not have to worry that the bank in the US, is open from 9 to 4. And if you want to send a wire overseas, you can't do that at 6 p.m., right? And if it's a US holiday, and you need to fund a deal that you're doing, out of Latin America, like you've got to make sure you funded it before the holiday. And so those pain points were really front and center for me because, again, I'm more on the payments and transference of value. So for me, I saw this fundamental problem of how do we do remittances cheaply, quickly, fast, all over the world? How do we fund deals, corporate transactions? And to me, it just made so much sense that we could use an alternative monetary value, right? Right. It's crypto isn't money in the traditional government backed, you
Hmm.
know, sense, but it's a value, right? And so people can agree to accept Ethereum as payment, or they could agree that I'm going to convert the Ethereum to fiat, or I'm going to convert it to stablecoin, and I can fund this transaction. And so, what I've seen is, from 2015, this sense of traditional finance saying, well, crypto is this dangerous um, asset class that's used for illicit finance, right? That in the dark web, right? Your Silk Road sort of days to now finance embracing it and saying, actually, yes, the market demands we be able to move value 24/7, 365. And so traditional finance and corporations using this tooling, right? That was really invented to circumvent the central financial system and now is basically coming into it.
And so, what is your advice to people who might be looking into entering this payment related uh, world? You know, what are, if someone has an idea to do something in like AI and crypto, right, with stable coins, what do you see as the opportunity? How do you think obtaining licenses contribute to the survival of a company in terms of giving them a moat, right? Balancing that with whatever is like the bonding requirements and the actual work and capital outlay that's necessary to actually accomplish and maintain that. What would be your advice and framework for thinking about that for founders?
I think it's about solving a particular problem in a way that the market needs, right? And
Hmm.
so if you're thinking about, payment problems, right? How do I uh, efficiently and safely pay contractors in Latin America, right, who are dealing with asset volatility, right? And they want stable coins, right? How do I make those remittances? How do I enable um, the use of credit card payments, but effectuating, the settlement through stable coins? AI is completely disrupting things. To me, it's solving a problem in a way that either others haven't solved or in a better way. And a better way could mean a better UX, a better, onboarding experience. And I think for me, when I tell people you need to federally register with FinCEN and obtain, 50 some odd state licenses to be able to do money transmission in the US, it feels like a very daunting process,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
that but those licenses are an asset of the company, right? Ultimately, they are an asset of the company. And so you can see your zero hashes, your bridges, right? Who spent the time to get these licenses and then hugely, hugely desirable, right? Or the exchanges who spent the time and the years to get them. So there's a cost to it, but I think you have to look at the return on investment, right? To be able to access the US market for retail customers.
Hmm.
There's really no other way if you're engaged in money transmission to do it without those licenses, unless you have a partner, right? And if you have a partner, you're paying a certain fee to have that partner move the money for you. And you're giving up, money, and you're also giving up some part of the control of the transaction.
Yeah, I think about that more and more frequently, especially as software itself becomes less of a moat. I don't think it's not a moat, but as that becomes easier to create, and also I think there is a more urgent need and incentive for people to keep adding features to their existing product, right? Then it becomes like, what is the differentiator between these different companies? And I think the answer, as far as I can come up with, are things like data, right? There are regulatory licenses, things like that. I think is what creates the most value. And I think, just because it takes so long to get those things, it becomes, like you said, a lot more attractive for an acquirer to consider the acquisition path instead of the alternate doing it yourself path.
Yeah, and I think when you also talk about data, right, you have to think
Yeah.
about security. And
Right.
so we at Change Agents spent, months getting our SOC 2 certification, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why any company would go through a licensing process with a vendor who isn't SOC 2 certified, right? To me, they're holding your data, they're holding your PII. And
Right.
so it's not just the ability to obtain the licenses, right, and maintain those licenses. It's the ability to feel safe that your data, your customers' data, is secure.
Right. Totally agree. So maybe I'm looking at the time here. Let me take a pause with my questions. Thank you, Michelle. And I'm gonna let
Mhm.
Riley take the mic here and ask a few questions of his own. For everyone who have not yet met Riley, Riley is an intern with me at New Territory Studios, helping with the Real Mamas project and the Collaboration City project. So let me just pin him here, and then I will remove myself.
Hi, Michelle. I mean, nice to meet you before I ask anything, and thank you for coming on. It's really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I remember like a question ago, you were talking like just like your journey and like how like crypto has changed over the years. And I was wondering specifically, like when you were at Big Law, was there like any like how has your view of compliance changed since you were on like more of the corporate side now that you're on more of the startup side?
I don't think my view has changed that much, to
Mm-hmm.
be perfectly honest. I think that compliance was always a core part of my practice. It was just, in a industry that was regulated a bit differently. I did a lot of work for investment advisors, for mutual funds. Um, but I think that the focus on compliance has really changed over the last 10, 11 years. And I think compliance was more of a potential check the box, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
say I'm doing these things, right? And I think compliance is more embedded in the work that I do and the projects I work with. And I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just I am like a college student, like still like trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. And working with Joyce, I like to see like how much like you can like juggle at once and always keep yourself busy with like the startup culture. So like what advice would you have at least for someone like me who might be interested into taking more of a startup route like later on in their career?
I think particularly for, you know, younger professionals, like the startup world is the place where you get so much exposure and so much responsibility.
Hmm.
And, our first hire was a woman who had just graduated from law school. And there was a job description, right? But she has gone above and beyond that job description. And so as she's done that, we've increased her responsibilities, elevated her title, increased her salary, right? Because at a large organization, there's lots of bands, and here's your level, and here's what you can earn, and here you're at a startup. I think most startups will give any hungry person the opportunity that they want, and they make of it. And I think that's what's wonderful. I think you also get to dip your toe in a lot of different areas, the engineering, product, marketing, legal, compliance, right? Because there's not a lot of people, and so you get exposure to all these different areas. And what I always encourage, you know more junior people is figure out what you want to do, right? You get exposure to all these things at a startup, and then try to hone in on what is it that you really like, after a year or 2 years, and then speak up. Say, you know what, I actually really feel passionate about the sales cycle or about product development. Can I do more of that type of work?
Mhm. Yeah, I remember a few months ago actually, my school did like a business competition, and the entire like basis of the competition was to start a business from scratch. Like you made like a fake business, and then there's like 3 rounds, and then first round was like make a 20-page business plan and like some financial models, and then second round was like when we got judges involved. So there's professionals from around my school who came in. I think most of them were from Johnson Johnson, and then after that, it was you got to present your business plan in front of like 100 people, and my role within that was the chief marketing officer. We had a CMO, I was a CMO, there's a CEO, and then there was a CFO. But then I found out like there was times where I was like helping out with like the financials, and then there's also times where I helped out with product development. And I guess like that's like um where I was like, wow, like this is like really fun. Because
Yeah.
because there was I've never been challenged in a classroom setting with something of that scale and like doing like all of like the public speaking. Like yes, it was very stressful, but I just like loved doing it. Like it was like
Yeah,
should
and
had a
I
good
I
time.
think
Yeah.
that's the point of those types of programs, right? So that
Mhm.
you see like, oh, you're slotted in as the marketing person, but finance needs help. So you very quickly figure out, well, what skills do I have that I can help the finance department? And
Mhm.
that's startup life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. I guess like another question, just to pivot a little. So like if someone told you like 20 years ago that you'd be running change agents, like what do you think would have surprised you the most?
Um, I don't think 20 years ago that I viewed myself as having the entrepreneurial spirit that I have.
Mhm.
Um, Not because I didn't have it 20 years ago, but because I think I didn't know that I had it. And I think that the trajectory that I had, which was, you know, go to college, get a quasi business degree, go to law school, work in big law, work for big companies. I think it wasn't exactly an innovative path. Um, but at the law firm, one thing they don't really teach you in law school is that part of being a partner at a law firm is the ability to sell and market. And it is very entrepreneurial, or it's meant to be very. And so once I realized, well, okay, I my network and I can sell my skills into my network. Um, I kind of got that entrepreneurial bug. And at a certain point, the problem that change agent solves is using AI and automation to help companies obtain and maintain regulatory licenses. Um, I'm not an engineer by training, but I had an idea to solve a problem. And I met my co-founder who was an engineer who said that's actually a very important problem to solve. And whereas before sophisticated automation and AI, we really didn't have the software tooling to solve that problem, to take company data, to take beneficial owner data, to take executive officer data, take it once and then use it to populate a whole host of forms domestically and internationally. Um, and once we had that ability to do it, I felt like this was a needed product in the market and I could solve a problem. I could reduce the cost to get licenses and maintain those licenses. And I could increase the speed at which companies obtain those licenses. Um, and really, it was just an idea. And so I would say, ideas are good things, and it's just a matter of one foot in front of the other. Like, if you believe in your idea, then go for it because, just because somebody else hasn't solved that problem doesn't mean it's not a good problem to solve.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess kind of like bouncing off of that, it's like a follow-up question. Like I do know like a lot of people like struggle in like startups, and I guess like one of the main issues is like getting their idea off the ground. So like how did you like approach that problem? Like just like starting off.
Honestly, it was just a fundamental belief like that this problem existed, that companies were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to law firms and consultants to obtain these licenses that I knew how to obtain and that I knew was a very inefficient process. And part of it, I think, was just one foot in front of the other, and tying it back to Real Mamas and Collaboration City, like when you're a mom and something happens, whether it's good or bad, like you just have to move forward. You've got to put one foot in front of the other. And if you believe, that you want your child to get into a certain school, or you want them to be able to get them into the after school sign up for some class they want to take, there's lots of places where you just do it. You just put one foot in front of the other and you just do it because you believe in it. um, and I actually think it's that simple. Like, does it work out every time? No, we had prototypes that didn't work out or didn't land well with clients, but what I also did was I build with our clients. And so I'm very transparent with our clients that, the technology is still developing and we want their feedback. And so I was able to build something that I knew the market needed, but I was also transparent with our clients that this tooling is still in development. And because we build with our clients, the tooling is going to be better for them because we're going to incorporate their feedback. So it was a bit of a different, I think it was a bit of a different path.
Okay. Yeah. I want to shift gears a little and then turn it back to Joyce for the testimonial just to make sure we have enough time. So, but thank you, Michelle. It was really insightful.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Michelle. Um, so what I'm gonna do now is to get your thoughts and really your honest feedback about what has worked with the community, what has not worked with the community, um, or like maybe like what you would want to see more of, right? In the context of building it together with the people that you're serving, right? So maybe I will start with just your impression having been in like the regular chat for a while, the base chat, and kind of seeing the uh, meeting some people in person and seeing the launch of Collaboration City and comparing it to some of the other organizations that you may be spending time with, right? What do you think is like the defining sentence? Like, how would you describe Real Mama's community as being different or similar than any of the other ones that you've seen?
I think it's the most authentic, to be honest. And at this stage in my life, to me, that is really the most important thing. I think, there's, I, I see a lot of similarities between me as a founder and you, Joyce, as a founder, right? You established a community because you wanted it for yourself, and it reflects the ideals and the needs that you were missing, right? And when you start a company or a community like that, it resonates, and I'm not sure that Real Mamas or Collaboration City would be the same without Joyce, right? Because that is the spirit. And what I've also noticed is that, you know, Thanya was one of your first collaborators, right? So to me, the foundation of Collaboration City and the foundation of Real Mamas is very strong. And just like a startup culture, like our first 10 hires, like those are so important because your foundation, if you have cracks in your foundation, you're not going to succeed. And so for me, what's different about Real Mamas is that authenticity. You can't pretend, right? And so in the larger community channels, there's lots going on, right? And so if I'm interested in wellness, right, I can go into the wellness channel. If I'm interested in AI, I can go into the AI channel, right? There's some other communities where if you don't post enough, you're threatened to leave. Well, that doesn't really work for me. I can't say that I'm going to post consistently all the time.
Yeah.
I enjoy looking at the posts. For Collaboration City, it feels like this this very sticky and supportive community. And again, it comes from, I think, Joyce's values, right? That this is a place where you are here to contribute and to help. And so when we were going through our capital raising process, Joyce was probably one of the first people who was like, I'm going to connect you with these different people. And those people, were just available at the drop of a hat to talk to me and give me their feedback and leverage their connections. That's what a community is about. And that's where I want to spend my time. And that's where I want to be present. It's not about a sponsorship level. It's not about how much pro bono work you give. It's not about how much you post. It's about a genuineness to want to collaborate.
Yeah, I think to the point where you said like at this point in my life, right? So I think that part is so true because I think we've spent many, many years kind of on this, what people some may call like a rising escalator path. I'm not sure if that's exactly true for you and I necessarily, but I think we've kind of done the thing and we've kind of followed what is protocol, right? And it's worked out fine. But I think especially when you put motherhood into context, like every minute that you don't spend with your family is such a huge trade-off. So for me, it's really like, what is worth it to spend my time on knowing the cost, like the actual cost, right? Um, so to me, like it's really about us first and making sure that we don't have to compromise on the values. If there's someone who isn't necessarily on board, that's fine, right? That's totally fine. But then we don't necessarily need to spend our time with them, right? So I think it's this knowing that we have each other and knowing like very deeply and believing in what our values are and then building that out from there. I think that's how we keep the community very strong. I think that's how we make sure that we can spend our time and energy with our group of people we enjoy collaborating with. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And so if someone was on the website and they're like, I don't really know what this is it for me, right? Would you say should be people to consider partnering with us or actually joining the community itself, or even just learning more, reaching out to someone who they know is there, right? Who would you say is the people who should do that? And to the extent if they're on the edge about doing it or not, what do you think they should consider, and what would be your advice to them?
I think, are we talking about Real Mamas or Collaboration City or both?
I think maybe each one in turn.
Okay. I think for Real Mamas,
Mhm.
to me, if you're a mom and you're in our industry and you want a community of like-minded women, right, who you can ask business questions about, who you can ask, I'm going on a trip and, I'm traveling with my infant, how do I manage this? Or, I'm breastfeeding and need help navigating how I'm going to do this, while I'm returned to work. I think this is such an important support network, right? It is just instantly you have a community of women who understand what you're going through and what that balance is required. I think for Collaboration City, it amplifies it a little bit more, in terms of I'm not just curious, but I want to be more invested, right? And I want to leverage the network for particular business purposes, right? But I think it also requires, you know, showing up, right? You create a lot of content, and a lot of meetings, right? And being part of Collaboration City, I think for me, it's really important that I can attend them, right? Can I attend every single one, the full thing? No, but I am a member of this community and it's important to me to show up because you, Joyce, and the team have prepared the important content, right? And have made it accessible. So I would say for people who are thinking about it, there's no downside. There's absolutely no downside to doing it. And in fact, I think there's only a benefit, and I think that you only truly realize the benefit once you're in the chats and once you're on the website and once you see how you can leverage the community and the knowledge of everybody in the community. Like we have a trading talks channel. Sometimes it is so over my head of what goes on in that channel, right? And one day, if I have enough time, I would love to chat with some of the main posters and be like, how are you doing this? Where are you getting this data from? I know that if I reached out to one of those women, they would immediately respond, right? And so I like the safety and security of that safe place to be able to ask those questions and leverage those resources.
Thank you. All right. That's basically the questions that I have prepared. If there's anything that we haven't asked and you want to share, now is the time to do so.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the community. I spent a lot of years feeling alone as a working mom, as a high performing working mom, right? A lot of feelings of, am I prioritizing the right things? And I think at this stage, my kids understand who their mom is, the motivations their mom has. And I don't make excuses for it anymore. And I think part of the community is knowing there's other women who are also high performing women who don't make any excuses, who are still really good moms. Like I'm a really good mom. I'm just a different kind of mom than maybe the mom whose work is in the house, or the mom who's working part-time, or the mom who's, you know, just returning to work. And so moms have lots of different faces and take lots of different forms. And I think Real Mamas and Collaboration City are the place where you can really be yourself, and know that there's someone else like you.
One hope I have with Collaboration City is actually to make a work-home connection. And what I mean by that is at school, my daughter, she's in pre-K. They make a really big emphasis on a school and home connection, which means that, the things they do at school, they expect us to talk about at home, and they expect us to share with them what we're doing when they're not in school so that they have this like cohesive experience together, right? Um, and for me, when I think about like my work and I think about all the things that I learned through my work, is something that I think we really need to share with our kids. Not only does it give them context for what exactly is mom doing when they're not here, right? But I think like we really have a vantage point to what is next, to what is coming in a way that I don't think you can get unless you're really in the trenches and really doing it. So especially for the older kids, I think it's really beneficial for them to be able to get access to that. I think for them, like I think Riley, is older than I think some of our kids, but for someone like them to be able to just ask and have access to and see these titles and know that there's someone there they can ask questions and that we can kind of open their minds to these new concepts, I think is really beneficial for them. So my hope is that through Collaboration City, and I describe it as people with intergenerational thinking, right? Which is like, how do we kind of feed these things that we learn and make it beneficial for really the next generation, to really maximize the value of the time that we spend in anywhere and to make sure that nothing's wasted and we really try to package it up in as many useful forms as possible.
For sure. And that we show our kids, right, the different faces of what a, a parent working looks like, right? And
Hmm.
and I think that differs for every single person.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's great, and I'm really appreciative to be part of the community.